Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Clean at Work. Today, we are talking to Jackie and John about their journey to getting their level one in systemic modeling. So, Jackie and John, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what exactly getting your level one in systemic modeling means. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it sounds really easy, right? It's like level one. How hard can it be to get to level one? uh, but actually, it's really quite hard, or at least it was for me, Jackie. I can't speak for you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's a multi-year journey, and the learning experience is very self-driven. So you have to do some trainings, what they call like the rolling programs, where we used to meet in person for 3 days, practice our skills and get feedback on those skills. And we've talked about some of the skills involved in previous elements, but really it's around being able to stay as unbiased as possible as the facilitator and be able to be really curious about what's going on in the group and helping them to create a network and understanding of each other's stuff. And that stuff we tend to refer to as something called a model. So our model of how we work at our best and how we work at our worst, and what difference it makes if I know, for example, how Sarah works at her best or worst, or Jackie works at best or worst. What adaptations can I make in my group so that we can all kind of go up to that next level of working at our best more often. And again, it still sounds not that hard. And I think most people, from what I've seen, start on this curve of, yeah, that sounds really easy, I'll give that a go. And then they go down into the pit of despair quite quickly when they realize
It's not easy.
it's not easy. And then, probably if it's anything like mine, Jackie, it's like a roller coaster from.
I was just thinking that the pit of despair happened more than once. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great description, John. I completely agree. Yeah. It seems really simple on the face of things, and I definitely went in thinking, oh yeah, I'll learn this. How hard could this be? And you soon realise, that ladder of competence model. You go in thinking, oh, this will be all right. You don't know what you don't know, and suddenly you realise just how much there is to learn and just how much you don't know. So it's kind of getting up to the finding out what it is you don't know, and when you think you've got that, you test it out and then realise that still got a bit more learning to do. And I don't think you ever kind of really fully know it. And Caitlin Walker said something really interesting this week about David Grove and clean language. And he said, you're never really an expert in clean language because you never know the client you're working with. And it's the same with these groups. So I don't think we're ever expert status. I think it's going to be a lifelong journey. Yeah.
I mean, Caitlin always says that when you get to level one, that's when you start to become competent. Which again, after that many years, is a feels a lot. But the metaphor I like to use is when I used to be into martial arts, and I've got 2 black belts, and what they say there is very similar. Becoming a black belt is a 3 to 5 year journey, for example. And then when you get your black belt, that's when you actually start your journey, right? That's when you can start to actually understand and make that your own. And that's how I kind of feel. I had to kind of give up almost on that kind of seeing level one as the goal and looking at, well, actually, what do I want to have happen now that I've got these skills? What difference will this make in the world? How am I going to start adapting and using this in my context, in my way? And for me, that's kind of was the big breakthrough to actually get in there in the end.
Yeah, it's very much a participation sport. You can't just learn it. You have to, once you achieve it, you have to get out there and do it. And it's a cycle, isn't it? Of what do I know? How can I use this? What's happening when I do it? What else do I need to learn? Yeah. So it's
I call it a craft. Journey. It's like coaching and those things.
I like that.
You don't learn a craft by learning lots of theory about how to make a table or a chair. If you're a craftsman, you learn by doing it, not looking how you wanted it to be, adapting, trying it again, until eventually you become a crafts person.
exactly
in whatever that is,
Yeah,
whether that's wood or
yeah,
steel or
It
yeah.
occurs to me
artist.
too that our audience might be watching this in 2021, and I think they're going to shift things, right, to make the levels a little smaller. So we'll have to put in the show notes when that happens. When we're talking about a level 1, that might be equivalent to a level 8 or something for our audience when they're watching this in a few months. So
yeah, I think from a ILM point of view, is it ILM they talk about,
ILM,
Jackie?
yeah, absolutely. It would be equivalent to 7. So from my experience, I do have an ILM in coaching, an ILM level 7 in coaching, and it's a master's level. And having been through this training over a number of years, I would absolutely say that this training is at master's level. So I think when Caitlin's talking about, changing the levels, as John said, a level 1 would seem as though it's really simplistic. If an ILM sort of level 4 is GCSE, for example. So people might think that level 1's super easy, and it doesn't really represent the complexity of it. So Caitlin's realigning the levels to I believe, align with ILM 7. Yeah.
Yeah. And from an ICF point of view, that was kind of be like almost MCC level. And if I've done some analysis between the levels in ICF, and a lot of the competencies that we're doing, Jack, and I can share the form with you after if you're interested.
That'd be great.
Is actually kind of what they expect from a MCC. So the ability to respond to change in the moment is something that they don't expect until you're at MCC level. So
absolutely,
yeah, it's kind of a big deal. I wish we had more people. Coming from an Agile background, where we love certificates and piece of paper, I wish we did get more piece of paper with it. we have to just do it for the love and the honor instead.
So silly, right? Okay, so we've talked about how much effort it is, and that level 1 is kind of a misnomer because it's really a lot of work and many years of dedication. Jackie, why don't we start with you and talk about why you decided to put in these years of practice and to learn all of this. Tell us about your journey to level 1.
Yeah. Well, it's been a really interesting journey because systemic modeling brought together 2 of my passions. So if I just go back in time, there's been through my earlier career, my whole life really, there's been a golden thread, and I've always worked with people who are very disadvantaged. So for a long time, I worked with long-term unemployed people and very specialist groups within that. People who are experiencing homelessness, very disadvantaged single parents. I worked in a charity for people with HIV and AIDS, and all of that was about creating the conditions for people to be at their best, and noticing that people are often not at their best and don't know how to be at their best. So that was my early career. And then I moved into the NHS, and I was working in leadership and organisational development, and I was a coach, and I trained as a mediator. And I noticed that people were having a lot of relational issues and really getting upset and falling out within their teams or with each other. And it was about relationships, and it was about communication. And I've always, apart from helping people to be at their best, I've always been really concerned to help people to relate better. So I wrote a course called How to Have a Courageous Conversation, for example. And along in the back of that, I found clean language through doing an NLP master practitioner course, and I was really interested in that, and it really helped me to write that course on how to have a courageous conversation. And then, and I don't know how it happened, someone drew my attention to Caitlin's video, her TED talk. And she was working with those young people, and they were incredibly disadvantaged, and they were on the edge of exclusion, on the edge of prison. And as I heard her talk about how she'd facilitated these people to understand what was going on for them, and then to be able to express that to each other so that they understood each other, and then be able to express that to the wider world so they could create the conditions to be at their best, it pulled all of my key passions together in one place, and I just had to find out more. And that's how I found my way to Caitlin. So yeah, and I've never regretted it for a second. As challenging as this journey has been, it's transformed how I am as a facilitator and a coach, and what I can bring to the work that I do. So that wasn't a brief introduction to how I got there, and sorry about that. John, what about you? What was your journey? I don't think I know your journey.
So I came from an Agile background, still work in Agile, and I started calling myself an Agile coach. But I knew a lot about Agile, but didn't know a lot about coaching. So I went on a bit of a discovery, came across something called ORSC, which is Organizational and Relationship Systems Coaching. And so I did kind of the 5 modules you can do in ORSC, and that was kind of life-changing for me from a personal reflection point of view. So it really started to change my views on the world and adapt who I am as a person, and really start to embed what we call that coaching kind of mindset of really believing that a system is naturally resourceful and whole, and a person is as well, and that there's all that potential that's there, and what can we do to help unleash that. And so I started getting those coaching skills, and was seeing the difference that was making in my clients, and on both an individual and an organizational level. There was still something missing to me, and so through Olaf Lewitz, I went on a clean language course with Judy Reese as well, and that was more kind of just an intro to clean, a lot of one-on-one stuff. And because we're from an Agile background, we do a lot of team stuff. So my curiosity was, okay, well, this is great, but how do we do this in a team setting? And so she kind of pointed towards Caitlin's work and said, oh yeah, there is someone doing this kind of work in teams. And so that's how I got into reading the book. So I listened to the Audible maybe 2 or 3 times. I was like, I've got to meet this woman.
Yeah. I read the book about 3 times. Yeah.
And I was like really nervous, because like most people where I've been like that, it's like when you meet them, they never kind of live up to the expectations. But Caitlin is actually one of the few people where I've met them, and it's like, oh, she's actually even, more humble and more impressive in real life than in a book. And that's really quite unusual, I've found. And so I did the Clean for Teams, and then I took a little bit of a break, around 6 months, and then I think I was finishing off some other things at the time and just kind of getting curious about it. And then I started with the rolling program, and I think I just did every one possible. I flew to Florida and hung out with Sarah for a week and did some, and we stayed together with Caitlin. We hired like a big place all together, so that was really great. So yeah, and I think the biggest surprise for me is I thought after all the work I'd done in ORSC, like I was done as a person, right? I'd changed, right? I'd adapted. I was like, well, what more, so that bit'll be easy because I've already done that, right? And then it's like, oh, how wrong was I?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you think as a coach and as a facilitator, you think you've really got self-awareness nailed, not 100% of the time, but that you're mainly there, and you spend a lot of time unlearning that doing this work. Absolutely.
It's really kind of humbling, right? It's like,
and
even today I was on a session this morning, and Olaf gave me some feedback at the end around some lack of clean that I used at one point. It's like, just a reminder that I'm still still learning this stuff, and it's
absolutely
little bits now that it's like that make a huge difference. I think those you can say the wrong word or just say something slightly different to what someone said, and it can change the whole dynamic of the situation. And it's in some ways quite, that's where the mastery comes, right? It's like in theory it's easy, and then when you look at those kind of nuances and what difference they make, that's the bit that I really enjoy. I love the fact it's hard.
That's exactly it for me. It's that the nuances, it's the subtlety, which is why you come along and think, oh, this looks okay, this looks easy. It's easy to do, but there's depth, a real depth below this work, and some real subtlety, that makes the difference.
So you've done all of this effort and put all of these years into learning and finally gotten your level one. So talk to us a little bit about, now that you've gotten it, how you're going to continue learning and how you're going to apply it.
So do you want to go first or shall I, John?
There you go, Jackie.
I'm already applying it because one of the things I have to do, and this is key for me, I do really want to say that certainly when I, and perhaps John, when you started learning this work, it was go on a course, there'd be a big gap to the next course, do a bit more, and it takes forever to do it that way. I'm a very experiential learner, so as I'm learning, I have to be actually sharing some of what I'm learning with other people. And I did that in a very open way. So I was working in the NHS at the time. I'm not now, I'm freelance now for the last 3 years. And I was saying to people, wow, this stuff's amazing. Let me share it with you. So I was inviting people to learn along with me. I was sharing out some of the skills, building my skills, seeing what I'd got. And I had an opportunity to do some fantastic bits of work. So being in the NHS, I worked with quite a few medical people, a couple of medical consultants who actively go away now and they use that in their work. One runs medical leadership programs and she does a day on clean language. The other one is a respiratory consultant and he's just won an award for innovation in his work, and everything that he does has clean language woven through it. My proudest moment was working with NHS blood and transplant in the organ donation team. So I worked with their professional development team, gave them some of these skills, and over 3 years they kind of learnt it, and we shared the skills to their team of specialist nurses who have bedside conversations about organ donation. And they use all of this now in their medical simulations and in their induction program. So that has been my proudest moment to date. And I use it in my coaching. It's absolutely transformed how I am. And it's really lifted the kind of coaching I can do. So before I did systemic modeling, I was coaching in quite a small pool, but now I coach academics, which, that's a real test. And I coach social workers and people who are neurodiverse and people in the public and private and voluntary sectors. And it's just lifted everything that I do phenomenally, I would say. So it's been a fantastic return on investment already. And I'm still committed to this learning journey. What about you, John?
So I don't think you, as you said, Jackie, I don't think you can get to level one just by doing the training. You have to be kind of living and breathing this stuff all the time. It's really hard to explain what it takes to get to that level one, and kind of what Caitlin's looking for when you do that. And I already said letting go of that certificate was really important, because when you've got that certificate as the goal, you can't be fully in service of the group. And if you're not in fully service of the group, people pick up on that very quickly. So it becomes part of everything, at least for me, it's become part of everything I do. So there's a thread in all of my work that is systemic modeling, or at least everything I do is systemically facilitated. So I run a lot of training, agile training, and all that's systemic facilitated, and we use the models throughout that. And I'm just going to launch a 6-month, what we call the IC Agile Coaching Expert next year, which will all be systemically facilitated and will include clean for agile teams or some kind of course specifically for people with the agile context who want to get more into systemic modeling. It's part of my coaching work. So all of my agile coaching work that I do uses systemic modeling, starting with agile scoping and into the work I do. And so I think it's just become part of my DNA, I would say, that I don't, it's like I don't really use many other approaches anymore. It's like, it just seems to I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but it just seems to be the only kind of focus. It seems to work in most contexts that that I particularly work in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're doing other things like finding work during a pandemic workshops and things like that. But I wanted to go back to something you said, Jackie, about when you're trying this out, experiential learning and trying it out in the wild, because I wanted to check in if you had a similar experience to me. So I was doing that a lot when we were in person before online. And what I found was that I was picking up a lot of bad habits. So I was doing things in the wild without any kind of one there to tell me that they were wrong. And then when I was going back into the training room, sometimes you'd be like, oh, why have I started? Someone would pick you up and you're like, oh, I wasn't doing that last training. What's happened? And so one of the great advantages I've found with this new online world is the ability to get more mentoring. Traditionally it'd be called, supervision, but I prefer to refer to it as kind of mentoring or peer support, where you can kind of bring these things and get that feedback much quicker than you could, especially when you're learning. So I think now I've got more understanding, and I still need that mentoring. But when you're first learning, it's kind of, you haven't got that same introspection and that
I
you
agree
may have now.
Completely. Yeah, there's the peer practice groups. There's a support group. You can kind of ask for help in the community, as I often do, and I'll say I've got a gig coming up on a Friday, who would like to support me with a setup, which is a way that we use to kind of get ourselves in the right state to do it. There's so much support now that wasn't available at the start, that I think it's likely to speed up someone's learning journey and to help them with kind of safety and due diligence. And I was lucky that I had people to call on. So as I was making my mistakes, I was kind of unraveling them with people and finding out, so what could I do differently next time, so this community is very supportive, I found.
And what we can do is, in the show notes, we can add information about the different practice groups. And then, of course, a link to Jackie's work and to John's work. We're about at the end of our time. So can y'all just give us one thing to walk away with for today? Like let's say that I'm just getting into this and I'm considering getting my level 1. What would be one piece of advice you would give me?
So I would say the world has never needed these skills more. They help people to explore the space between their opinions, and they help you to explore what other people mean by what they say and what you mean by what you say. And the world has never needed these skills more than they do now. So I would say go for it. We need more people doing this work in the world.
Thank you, Jackie.
I would just say be ready for your world to change. I think that would be the biggest disclaimer for me. It's like, go ahead. We really need these skills, but it's going to make a bigger difference to you than anyone else. So just be ready for that change.
Absolutely, John. That's gorgeous. I agree. Yeah.
All right. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John, for being an interviewee.
Please do remember to like and subscribe and follow us for the next session, which will be Svetlana, who is a level 2 systemic modeler. So you've heard from Jackie and I today, and we've just achieved our level 1. Next week, we're going to find out what it takes to get to that level 2 and what difference that makes.
Great.
I'll be watching that one with interest.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.